superstar clinical psychologist, author, counselor, and doctor, Susan Heitler, here to discuss her newest book, Prescriptions Without Pills. Dr. Heitler graduated from Harvard and earned her doctorate in clinical psychology from NYU. You may know her from her other stellar titles, like From Conflict to Resolution or The Power of Two. She practices at Rose Medical, and she is the go-to psychologist for Fox News. She is well recognized and well respected in her work, in her community for her work. Please help me in welcoming Dr. Susan Heitler.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Daniel. Thank you to all the friends and family and newcomers to me who I see here today. Thank you so much for coming out on this beautiful sunny day to sit in a quiet, dark place, which is often a good place to read a book, and which today hopefully will be a good place to think about dark emotions. Before we start in on the heavy stuff, though, let's have a little fun, because dark emotions can be a source of creativity. I'm going to give a little test. Let's make it a quiz. Or better yet, let's make it a competition. Do I have my prize distributors? Okay, they are my prize grandsons, I might add, amongst the prize grandsons. So I'm going to give you a little test about the thoughts about dark emotions in music. For instance, what whole genre of music celebrates depression? Who was back there? One. Anyone else get the blues? Out with the Cracker Jacks. And because she was first, she gets also the blues. You get a free copy of my audio tape, Depression, a Disorder of Power. Now, you must be particularly motivated to get the answer to this second difficult question. What famous trio, I'm showing my age now, this goes back to the 60s maybe 70s. What famous trio became quite famous with a song about a worried man?
Kingston Trio.
Yay! 2 Cracker Jacks for the persons. And the audio anxiety, friend or foe? The Beatles had a lot of wisdom about dark feelings. They had a solution, though. I get by.
The little help for my friend.
Right here.
And they had another suggestion. Whatever gets you through the night.
Yes, right. Cracker Jacks for Mr. Merson. Okay, this is going to take a little more thinking. You'll have to go from fast thinking to slow thinking, as the psychologist Kahneman said. In the song, "You Are My Sunshine," when do you make me happy? You make me happy when skies are gray. Okay, 2 right here. Now, last question. The real goal of this talk today is for you to be able to live your lives, and for readers of Prescriptions Without Pills, to be able to live their lives in the zone of well-being. Others might say to get some satisfaction. Who couldn't get any satisfaction? I missed it, but they both get more Cracker Jacks that they can share. So let's switch now from music to angels. Now, you might be wondering, what do angels have to do with prescriptions without pills? What do angels have to do with negative feelings? So I like to think personally of negative feelings as being like angels. In my tradition, which is a Jewish tradition, angels are messengers. They can be a person, they can be a bird that flies in, they can come in many forms, but they come to give a message. If you listen to the message, odds are not only do the angels go away, but it will help you in your life. Dark feelings, unpleasant feelings in the form of pain are there to give you a message that you have a physical problem. Dark feelings emotionally are there to tell you there's something disturbing going on in your life. We might call it a bump, which brings us to the basic theory of emotions that I present at the outset of Prescriptions Without Pills. This theory is also the basis for how to make those negative emotions go away. I call this my handout, or a hand map. Actually, all of you have this handout already with you. Don't worry if you didn't see it on your chair. All you have to do is put your hand out, if you'll excuse the bad pun. If you put your hand out, or you can look at my hand, you'll see that as you're bumbling down the road of life in the flow, you will hit, from time to time, a bump. Oh no, that bump could be a decision. It could be something that you didn't like that happened. It could be something that as you look ahead looks scary or upsetting, an issue, a problem, a dilemma. We have lots of vocabulary. I'm going to simplify it and call it a bump. Now, when you reach a bump in life, even though you'd rather stay here on the merry realm of well-being, you've got a problem. And you don't feel a sense of well-being. You feel something negative, negative energy. You have at that point 5 possible paths. If you're skillful, you will address that bump with the pathway of finding solutions. Oh, and that thumb route brings you back to the realm of well-being, which you can stay in until you hit the next bump, because life has bumps. Life is not a smooth highway for at least anyone I know. There's always bumps. So as long as you find solutions, you're in great shape. A lot of times, it's not so easy. So then you end up with the 4 negative routes. Find solutions is the thumb route. The finger routes are fight, fold, freeze, or flee. Let's go through them one by one. If you get angry, all that adrenaline is to mobilize you to fight. Why do you fight? Why do you use anger? Basically, to get something that you want by dominating over whatever the opposition is. For instance, if you're a lion in the jungle, you fight in order to get dinner, or maybe to get your first choice of mates. So fight road is using anger to get what you want. Now, some of us aren't so comfortable using anger to get what we want. And some of us just don't feel big enough and strong enough. In fact, just recently some research came out that said they can test who's likely to fight and who's likely to take the fold road and get depressed just by measuring grip strength. Subconsciously, we know how powerful we are. If I'm a lion and I see a larger lion, I know if I get into a head-to-head with that lion, I'm going to get injured. There's no hospitals or doctors in the jungle. So a lion or any other animal is very smart biochemically. It experiences a drop in serotonin level. When your serotonin drops, you feel less powerful, hopeless. So if you're a lion, you just slink off let the bigger lion have the prey or the prized female. If you're a person, you also fold vis-a-vis getting what you want. Okay, we've got fight road, we've got fold road. Fold road goes to depression. If you don't want to fight, but you're not ready to give up, what's another option? Deer in headlights. Freeze. Do nothing. Just get stuck. So we initially feel anxious when we see something scary. If we freeze, instead of finding solutions, we continue to feel anxious. That angel just is a nuisance that hangs around and makes us feel bad for a long time. Nobody wants to feel bad. If for some reason you don't feel like you have the ability to find a solution, oh, there's a fourth road. Flee. Escape. That's the addiction's route. Any distraction will do it. Alcohol, workaholic, eating. There's lots of ways that we human beings can cleverly distract ourselves. That's the basic map that I presented in my first book, which was for, well, my first major book, which was for therapists, From Conflict to Resolution. I'll pause to say thank you to the person who got me started and who's here today on my writing. I wrote my first book, David Decides About Thumbsucking, which helps families help children end thumbsucking with the help of someone who's here today. She said, oh, I know something about the book business. And she helped me with the publishing, and I self-published the first book. And that's how I realized, oh, there's something gratifying about writing books. That's an aside. Thank you. So we have the map now and the reasons for why we get negative feelings. They're there to help us, basically. What if we get mired in one of those negative feelings? What are our options then? Unfortunately, ads on TV make us think that the best option is to run to your local physician or physician's assistant. Once you see them, they want to be helpful. So odds are, to a man with a hammer, the world's a nail, as the saying goes. So to a medical person, writing prescriptions is one of the capacities they have. So odds are you will get a prescription for some kind of medication that will enable you to feel the feeling less. I see that as quite unfortunate in many ways. For one thing, it doesn't do the basic thing that the angels were there to tell you, which is to go back and find that problem and find a good solution to it. In addition, medications, and particularly medications for anxiety or for depression, have downsides. For anxiety, often the medications that are prescribed have very high addictive potential. Nobody wants to get an addiction in order to get rid of some anxious feelings. The drug companies say that antidepressants are not addictive. That's because the definition of, in the DSM, the manual therapists use for addiction includes a craving. Nobody says, oh, I can't wait to get my next dose of medication. That's not the way antidepressants work. However, they do make people drug dependent. That means that if you stop taking the antidepressant, there's significant odds that your body is needing that medication now, that chemical, because it's gotten used to having it. Your brain has become drug dependent. That means that getting off it will trigger a depression. That depression doesn't mean that you've been depressed all along and the antidepressant has been helping you. It just means that now your body is dependent on the medication. And that's why you're crashing, unless you go off very slowly. Now, there's other downsides to medication, one of which is they tend to eliminate some but not all aspects of the depression. They can make weight gain, they can make lower libido, they can make a numb kind of feeling, so you don't feel as depressed. You also don't feel as much happiness and joy. One woman said to me once, you know, I feel so angry every time I think of that antidepressant that I took for 12 years. I feel like it robbed me of 12 years of living. Now, I don't mean to say that everyone who takes antidepressants is going to have a negative reaction. For some people, they're genuinely helpful. For some people, there's a little bit of side effects, and it's well worth it because they can remobilize, begin living life again, and go back and deal more effectively with the problems. Having said that, let's go look at the alternatives. Prescriptions without pills gives alternatives for each of the main kinds of negative emotional experiences, for the 4 negative pathways. It turns out that it's not so easy, for instance, when you're angry, to figure out what am I mad about. That's because once you get mad and ginned up, you begin to think about winning. If you say to yourself, anger is a stop sign, what do you do at a stop sign? Stop. It's that easy. Not that easy when you're really revving up, because anger is mobilizing you to attack. If you say to yourself, anger is a stop sign, and stop, or if need be, stop and walk into another room so you can take the pot off the stove for a moment and stop boiling. If you stop, what do you do at a stop sign? Any second graders here? They would know. Right. Stop, look, and listen. So what do you need to look for? You need to look to figure out what the problem is. There's a very good phrasing for that question. What do I want? Remember, anger is a dominating way of getting what you want. What do I want? Now, it's important also to listen. What do other people want? So if you say to yourself, anger is a stop sign, and then ask, what do I want? Oh, that can be very helpful. Because then you can say, what's a better way to get what I want? Now that may sound all well and good in the abstract. Let me give you a story, a case example, where asking that question, what do I want, and what's a better way, once a man had stopped, anger is a stop sign. I'll start by introducing, this is actually a couple. And I do have this couple's permission to tell that story. And along with their permission, they chose names for themselves. His name is Alejandro. He thought Alejandro sounded very exotic. He liked that idea. And she chose Yolanda. So when Yolanda and Alejandro walked into my office, they had already filled out a symptoms checklist, so they handed that to me, and they sat down in the 2 yellow comfortable chairs at angles to each other so they could talk to each other, and with a kind of triangle. I'm in the 3rd corner of the triangle, so I could talk with both of them or have them talk with each other. I took a look at them and I thought, why are they here? This is such a handsome couple. They passed my salt and pepper shaker test for couples, which was that if there were a lot of people all on one table, everyone would know right away that salt shaker goes with this pepper shaker. They also seemed to have pretty good vibes between them. He was very gracious in letting her walk in the room first and pick which chair. It all looked great. I opened up their symptom checklist. I thought, oh no. People check which negative emotions they're experiencing and rank them 0, and I like to see lots of 0s, to 5. This was filled with 4s and 5s, both of theirs. These people were highly distressed. So we sat down to talk, and I said to myself, I am very glad I have a map with me, my hand map, because this could get very complicated. How do I know where to start with this much distress? Well, the good news is, in addition to my having the hand map, I know that people know what they need to do to heal. People know what order they need to address their issues. So I asked them, what shall we look at first? they said, basically, we're on the brink of divorce. We're together by like a thread. That made me feel comfortable. So what should we talk about first? And Yolanda said, his anger. He said, fine, let's talk about my anger. I admit that I've been yelling at my wife, which is kind of uncharacteristic. And that was a relief to hear because he seemed like such a nice fellow. He said, I've been yelling at her because she won't do what I tell her. Now, he didn't seem a particularly controlling person. So I asked, what are you telling her? And he said, well, she's been really depressed, and I've been telling her what she needs to do so she won't be so depressed. And she won't listen to me. Now, I thought, excuse me, men in the world, but there is a pattern where when men hear a woman say a problem, or anyone say a problem, they tend to think it's their job to fix it. This is helpful. The difficulty is if men try to fix it by giving the answer, and that answer doesn't fit for the woman, she'll say no, or else she'll fold and get depressed doing what he said. She said, no, I don't want to do that. So he said it again, louder, louder, like we learn in football cheers. And that's where all the anger was coming. He was so frustrated, he was trying to help her. And besides, he didn't need her every evening after work coming home and complaining about how awful it was, because he had problems of his own and he was already very stressed. So he would get madder to fix the problem. Fight road, right? Okay. Remember the formula for the fight road? Anger is a stop sign. No, let's skip the magic question. You ask the questions of stop, looking, and listen. What do I want here? And what's a better way to get it? To those questions, Alejandros said, look, really what I want is for my wife to feel better. What's a better way to get it? And he said, I brought her in here. So I thought, that's a start. That's good. And we agreed that while he was in here, he would learn skills for how to be helpful when his wife was upset about something. Having said that, I switched to Yolanda. Yolanda, what struck me, the 5 amongst your 4 and 5s that really struck me was depression. How would you feel about starting with that? She said, absolutely yes. She said, actually, I don't think I realized how depressed I've been until I had to put a number to it. And when I realized I've really been depressed and I've been feeling this way for months, I understand now why I went, and actually Alejandro went with me, to a physician to get antidepressants. Because antidepressants help sometimes with anxiety also, and he wanted her to get help. So he said, look, I'll go with you, and the physician gave them both an antidepressant. The antidepressant hadn't helped their emotional state. It did have one impact. It ended their sexual relationship. Neither of them had any libido anymore. When a couple is already having troubles and they now are not connecting sexually, big problems ahead. Okay, having said that, let's work on your depression, I said to Yolanda. Close your eyes. And what I'll demonstrate for you is what I call the 3 P's visualization. Now, the problem with depression when you fold is often people lose sight of what the problem was that they folded about. And at first, Yolanda thought, I'm just depressed because I've been so beaten down by his anger. But when we did the 3 P's, that was in fact not what came up. Anger can have a depressant effect. For Yolanda, though, I said, close your eyes. And the first P is pinpoint. Pinpoint what the problem is. Close your eyes and allow an image to come up of someone or something other than yourself, because when people are depressed, they're always mad at themselves. Other than yourself, someone or something that you feel mad at, maybe irritated, maybe raging, anywhere in between. Yolanda paused for a minute and then said, that's funny, I see the conference room at work. Now, Yolanda, I'm changing the details, by the way, so for confidentiality, like the names, but the details are equivalent, just different arenas. So she worked at a job in the men's world. She worked in construction. She was a project manager for a large construction company. She said, I'm picturing how annoyed I am at the other managerial level people that are in my company. I'm picturing the way when we have a meeting, I say something and they're dismissive. No, that won't work. Or they just go on talking as if I hadn't even said anything. Or I'll start to talk and someone will interrupt me and the group turns over to him. And it's always him because at that table I'm the only woman. How do we know if this is really the depressogenic moment, the depression-causing moment? So we go on now to the second P, pump up. That begins with asking, well, Yolanda, as you look at the men at that table, and they're not listening to you or dismissive, and she said, and sometimes they're even sarcastic, and I really hate that, sort of contemptuous. As you look at them, who looks bigger, you or the men? She said, I'm like a grasshopper, and they look huge. I mean, construction attracts these big football player-looking men, so I'm physically smaller, but I feel even smaller than I am physically. I was very happy to hear that, because that clarifies that we did find the right moment. When someone is depressed, they become powerless. They feel physically smaller, shorter, less powerful than whoever or whatever they're angry about. So then, how do you pump up now that you've verified the smallness? I said, keeping your eyes closed, take a deep breath. And then with each subsequent breath, see yourself growing bigger. Feel yourself growing bigger. I'm bigger now, she said. How much bigger are you? Well, I'm bigger than I was before. I'm like person size. I said, that's a good start. Now take some more breaths so that you're bigger than them. Way bigger. She took some more breaths. And then she paused again, and I said, how big are you now? She said, well, I can barely fit in the room, I'm so big. I thought, oh, now this is good. We're ready to move into the third P, problem solve. From that new, bigger size, what's the data that you can see? What do you see about those men or the situation or yourself that you couldn't see when you were so small? Oh, actually, they don't look so scary anymore, for one thing. And as a matter of fact, I'm remembering that of everyone in that room, I probably know the most. I wouldn't have gotten a job as a woman in that company if I wasn't really knowing my stuff. In addition, some of them are just not very nice people. They're just kind of, there's a nasty tone. That probably comes from the head of the company. Groups take on the personality, this comes from me, groups take on the personality of the leader. But what she said was, the head of the company is just really not a nice person, snapping at people. And with that information, what solutions come to mind for what you could do differently? Her first thought was, I'm so big, I'm going to go over to them and punch them one by one. She looked pleased for a moment, and then she said, well, that's not quite going to solve my problem. So the beauty of visualizations is you can let yourself have the thought and then decide not to do that plan of action. Okay, what other thoughts come to mind? Yolanda looked again with her eyes closed at the situation, and she said, you know, as I'm watching that scene and listening, I can hear that when I speak up, I speak in a very quiet voice. I don't need to do that. I speak in the kind of voice that matches how I'm feeling inside, which is that nobody's going to listen to me. I'm tired of doing that. Actually, I think I've been doing that with Alejandro as well. And I'm tired of not being heard. I'm going to say what I think. If they don't hear me, I'm going to say, excuse me? I want to go back to the point I just made. And she sounded strong enough that I would have listened to her. How are you feeling right now, Yolanda? I asked. She said, I feel great. I don't know what happened to that depressed feeling, but it's just not there anymore. The 3 Ps. Pinpoint the problem, pump up so you have the power to address the problem in a new way, and then problem solve to find new solutions. That's my favorite prescription for moving from depression back to the problem and back to the realm of well-being. How about freeze? The formula for resolving freeze is fairly easy. I call it the list prescription. I mean, this is so easy, it sounds ridiculous, only it works every time, even with quite severe anxiety reactions. To make a list, you used to need 2 things, paper and a pen and pencil. Now all you need is one, your computer, or a friend who'll write down for you. So I said to, in this case, Alejandro, you mentioned that you've been really stressed. Now, stress is a word that usually means anxiety. He said, yeah, I'm worrying all the time, I'm stressed, I'm anxious. So I said, let's use the list technique. I'm going to be your secretary, or at least I'm going to do what secretaries used to do. I'm going to write down as you talk. And give me a list, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, of every thought that makes you anxious. In fact, before we do it, close your eyes and feel that anxiety within you. Where is it? And his hand was about like this. I said, about what size? Just to double check. He said, oh, kind of grapefruit size. In fact, it feels yellow, bright yellow, like a grapefruit. Great. So I want to hear each thought that intensifies that grapefruit-shaped and sized yellow spot. He gave me a list of his anxieties. He said, I've been working for the last year or so on a startup. It was a great idea, and when I started, I loved it. Right now, though, the thought that makes me anxious is, I can't do this. I did pretty much make my product, but I can't market. I don't know where to go from here. I don't know how to scale up. This feels totally overwhelming. Next thought, I'm tired of working alone in the garage. Next thought, I don't think this is going to get anywhere, and it's taken much longer than I thought. I would love to see income again. Okay, there were several other thoughts, but this is enough to give the idea. We circled back around again. Okay, if your concern is how could you get people to help, he thought, and he said, well, I'm coming up with 2 options. One, I could put the whole project aside for a while. It's just too much. Go out and work somewhere else. Look at how other people do marketing for startups, even get a job in another startup, and get my practice on someone else's time, and then come back to it. Or I could just sell the whole thing to someone who is willing to take a startup idea and then take it the next way. It won't give me the millions that I thought I was going to get with this startup. And at the same time, I'd feel like I'd completed the project. So already he was ahead of the game. What about that isolation? Oh, boy, going out and get a job. Getting a job sounds so attractive to me now that I really think about it. I haven't let myself think about that because I'm not a quitter. Oh, that was another concern we added to the list. I don't want to be a quitter. Oh, so how can you not be a quitter? Oh, I can just take a break. Or I can say, I love the phrase, declare victory and then move on. I accomplished inventing this product I wanted to invent. So now, having done that much, I can go do something else, at least for a while. And so on down the road. There's something about actually writing down each of your concerns that then, it's like, I used to be a school teacher. I'd panic when I'd see all the kids crowded around the water fountain. If they got in a line, it all felt much more doable. So this, making a list, lines up the concerns and enables somebody then to circle back, take them one by one, and come up for solutions responsive to each concern. Now we're down to the fourth route. Flee an addiction. You haven't heard about addictions in this case yet, right? Not so quick. Yolanda was so depressed. She was desperate. She wasn't getting the help she wanted from her husband, but there was someone whose desk was right near hers at work who had a sympathetic ear. She began talking with him. He was so supportive. They talked more and more, and she opened up about her personal life as well, how dysfunctional her relationship with Alejandro had become. He was so sympathetic, and one day he came closer and put his hand on her knee, and the sparks, she could feel the excitement. See, new romance is much more intense than familiar sexual interactions. So even with the antidepressant, the sexual energy was potent. Sexual energy also happens to be addictive. So she found all the time she was thinking about getting her next fix. And then one day, as she was driving home from work, she thought, this is getting very dangerous. I'm beginning to think thoughts that I never thought would enter my mind. She went home, and to her credit, she told Alejandro what had been going on. He was upset. He also was motivated to, hey, let's just get help right away. That was the final straw that had put their relationship on near divorce status. I give Yolanda a lot of credit. She, on her own, put an end to that connection. No more private talking. But I'm so glad that that was part of this case for sharing with you, because people don't realize how easily even the best of people can slip into an affair, and how an affair is a very dangerous addiction. Dangerous for the survival of a marriage, because then a divorce is a kind of a death in some cases. Okay, end of that story. Let's move on. Let's sum up all of this. What have we learned from looking at these four main pathways to emotional distress and the solutions for them? I think the first thing for me is to look back on those angels and to suggest to you, listen when you have a negative feeling. These prescriptions are not just for extreme level 4 and 5, or 9 and 10 on a scale of 10. Your emotions do not have to be yelling at you before you listen. I'll speak from experience here, because in the course of writing a book, I go through a lot of emotions. I have my periods of anxiety. I have my periods of depression, lightweight. I just can't do this. Anxiety, oh my goodness, there's no way I'm going to meet my deadline. Do I get angry? I'm not prone in that direction, and book writing, oh no, I take that back. Don't tell my editors. But I could feel very angry at them. I hired my own editors for the document, and the first one I hired basically didn't do anything. So we switched. The head of the company said, I'll give you someone else. The second person had a shtick about commas. On every page, and I'm not exaggerating, she put in 3 to 5 commas. I then had to spend my upcoming vacation going through the whole 300-some pages, removing commas, and doing the editing she was supposed to do. There is a hero in this part of the story, though, and he happens to be sitting here, which is I found a dear friend and relative who is a very good editor, and he just sat down and worked I don't know how many hours and did the copy editing she was supposed to do. I could remove commas, but it takes someone who's never read a text. So that was a case where I felt all 3 emotions. Anger at her, but it wasn't going to do any good to yell at her. And I calmed myself down. What's a better way to get what I want? Hire someone else and discuss the problem with the head of the company, who I must say was wonderful. I give her credit. Second, I was depressed. I'm not going to be able to finish this. Again, I could easily, because the depression was light, just like level 1 or 2, I could solve that problem. I could say, wait, I'm going to drop everything else I'm doing, like having a baby. I'm just going to focus on finishing this book. Like when you go into labor, you don't go out and weed the garden or do the dishes. You just do labor for a while until that baby is out. And believe me, I wanted to get this baby, Prescriptions Without Pills, out. And then the next was anxiety. And I had kind of low-level anxiety for a long time. Will people like this? Will they not? I sent the manuscript out to various people, other psychologists, other authors of books, and the feedback was so positive, enthusiastic, that my anxiety went way down. I will tell you the moment where it went away altogether, though. Just to do a little side story here, Daniel, who introduced me and who arranged all this talk, had said, be sure to tell them why you wrote this book. I wrote this book as a kind of legacy, not exactly right, way to talk to my children and grandchildren to convey to them what I've learned as a therapist. In addition, hopefully, other people would read it and many people would benefit. But somehow deep in my heart, the most important is my children and grandchildren. So when it first came out, I brought the book, not to the family that's here now, but to one of the other families. They have 5 children, and they're very lively. They fought over the book. I was so thrilled. Then the crowning glory was that night, I heard their dad, who can be very patient, getting mad at the girl, who was at that time a 10-year-old girl. Why was he mad at her? She kept sneaking the book out. He closed the light, kissed her goodnight, and then 3 minutes later, he saw the light was back on. She couldn't put it down. She was reading through all the case examples. I was thrilled. I was thrilled. So that is about anxiety and how low-level anxiety also is responsive to the very same techniques as we've been talking about today and as you'll find more of in the book. They're techniques I use, because if it doesn't work on me, I'm certainly not going to suggest it for anyone else. They work for my clients. I certainly hope they work for you. Thank you so much for coming out today and joining me.
I might be able to get a view of you a little better. Absolutely.
Let's try that.